All right, now let's move on to other matters now, and I'm going to be getting into the next conversation. We'll get an outlook for foreign investor sentiment for the Nigerian economy. Also get an outlook for the naira, because everyone's trying to know where the naira is going to go in 2025. Joining us for this conversation, we have Thacker. He's an investment manager, TLG Capital. Great to have you on the show. Happy New Year.
Hi, Larry. Happy New Year. Hope you're doing well, and thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. So, 2024 has been quite interesting. We've seen, most industries, we've seen them hammered, by the weight of, rising prices, rising inputs. But we've seen investors really do well with, a couple of indexes, commodities rising. But back here, the naira didn't have the best year in 2024. Talk to me about word on the street, on the investment streets out there. That's for foreign investors. How you seen Nigeria? How you seen the naira?
Thanks. So look, I think obviously 2024 was a super tough year. In many ways, I would say versus where we are this year is considerably different in many ways, right? You've got regime change, you've had change up in Abuja with the SEC, the central bank. You've got a really ambitious new budget that was published a week or two ago. That's got a huge amount of spending in a country where the tax base is quite narrow. We have seen, I think, a lot of really interesting investment opportunities. You've seen large corporates leave, and people like to make news stories of that. But the truth is, if someone's leaving, then someone's buying, right? So Toleran bought Guinness, someone else bought Old Mutual, someone else bought Champion. There are acquirers of these multinational companies, the farmers, the beverages, the insurers that are leaving, that see opportunity. And so I think, at the end of the day, inflation is the main problem. As high as you make MPR, if the issue is based on importation, which I think your previous guest discussed from a bakery or a wheat perspective, you've got those supply side issues. Inflation will be the determinant of, I think, where the currency will end up in the medium term. But was there some correction in the naira in December? Yes. There was more supply because the central bank unwound some swaps, etc. So I think you could see some near-term appreciation, which is where the speculators and the carry traders and the people buying the OMOs do quite well. But in the medium term, I think a lot of the issues are a bit more supply side. And you may expect to see that sort of transmit through the currency, but we remain really optimistic and certainly overweight Nigeria.
Right, and looking at FPI, it came in quite hot in 2024. Do you see that playing out in 2025?
Yeah, for sure. I think the big news for us that we saw in the last quarter of 2024 was actually what was happening in the oil and gas and energy space. There'd been a number of these disposals or divestitures. They'd been stuck with either the regulator or someone who had to approve, or with the ministry. You've seen now, Seplat, Shell, Renaissance, a lot of these approvals have been granted. That can only be positive for production from a barrels perspective. And I think what was even more encouraging was seeing Shell and some of these other sort of, large energy companies take final investment decision. So seeing FID come through brings in dollars. It helps energy, it helps stability and security. And I'm generally quite positive about FDI in general. I mean, you've seen the news of, Brazilian meat packers wanting to open in northern Nigeria. And the truth is, when you're bringing in CapEx, this is typically in dollars. It's typically with a view to get a payback within a medium to long-term horizon. And so to the extent to which people are confident allocating capital into Nigeria, that can only be a good thing, I think, for the economy. And we are seeing some of that. Although I would, still mention that the inflation and currency issues are probably likely to persist in the medium term, at least.
All right, looking at it from an investment perspective now, in 2025, what do you think should be that investment, that asset class, that I think is going to get all the shine, in 2025?
So I think, one that I'm really interested to watch in this coming year are the banks, right? So last year we had this sort of, big circularization from the central bank governor saying that you have to raise all of this equity, choose whether you want to be a national or regional or a local bank. And some of these banks have come up with the equity. I think there'll be a bit of a cat and mouse game, right, where the banks will say that they've raised, and the central bank will have to earn their stripes and look into what they've done or not done. But I think it will be really interesting to see how the banking landscape evolves in 2025, because historically, Nigeria's had a lot of regional banks. You've had Wema, that's historically the bank of the South and Southwest. Fidelity, which is associated with the bank of, more of an Igbo bank. You've had the non-interest banks, which have, had a little bit more luck in the north. But if you're coming up with all of this equity and you're consistent, you're basically saying to your existing and your new investors that you're going to be a national or international bank, it's up to you to now go and earn that and prove that. And I think there's a lot of, stress in the system from a corporate perspective. You've had central bank increasing rates and also making the cash reserve ratio incredibly high, restricting what banks can do with their funds. And so the question will now become, once these banks are bigger, they're more capitalized, they're able to allocate their capital, how are they going to do this, and how is that going to transmit into the economy? Because as we all know, the banks are the lifeblood of any economy. They take our deposits, they lend to our businesses, and they also lend to our government. So I think that's a sector I'm particularly interested to see how it will fare in the coming year, and we're working very closely with them.
All right, we'll definitely keep watching. Thank you so much. It was great having your perspective today. That was Thacker, Investment Manager, TLG Capital. Thank you so much, and Happy New Year.
Thanks, Laddie. Happy New Year. Appreciate it.